I'm in Max. You are listening to Happy Jacks RPG Podcast. I'm in Max. Pursuing the RPG hobby with reckless abandon. Why, hello, and welcome to Season 28, Episode 13 of Happy Jacks RPG Podcast. My name is Stu.
Howdy, I'm Stork. It's been a while, Stu.
It has been. It's been like a month.
We don't talk much anymore.
No, and we're going to go back to weekly starting in July.
Cool.
We'll probably stay on Saturday mornings for a while, but eventually we'll also switch back to Fridays.
Well, I don't mind the Saturday mornings. I just miss your shiny pate.
It is very shiny today. It is. I was out working. I was hanging stuff and getting the studio prepared for back to in-person stuff, which will be.
Oh yeah, that's other news.
Also,
yeah, we can discuss that as well. Cool.
I believe. So in this episode, Andreas writes in about convention games, and we're also going to do the two things we did last week, but it'll be different. So,
because I'm here.
Because you're here. But first, if you'd like to email us, you can email us at happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. That's happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. We do the show live on Saturdays at 9 a.m. apparently. I guess the schedule has been saying 9 a.m. and we've been starting at 10.
This is a surprise to me too. I just happened to be looking. I'm like, oh my god.
But I just got a notification that I'm going to need to pick my kids up after a hike, and it's probably going to happen between 10 and 11, so we'll go ahead and do it when it's scheduled.
Worked out.
Yes. So at 9 a.m. Pacific time at happyjacks.org/live, and you can join us there. And there's no one in the chat room because everyone's probably expecting us to start at 10. That would be my guess.
Sorry, guys. Oops.
I believe, let me just double check. I believe, yes, there are 2 bots in the chat room, and that's it. It's awesome. All right. First off, okay, I'm going to ask Stork this because
I'm ready. I'm ready for this.
So you're in an elevator.
Okay.
The elevator's going down. Someone gets in. They're nervous, and they tell you
my elevator's always going down. It's plummeting.
Right.
Me.
And someone gets in. They're like, "I'm really nervous. I'm going to be GMing for this first time. Is there any advice you can give me? Because my game starts in a minute."
Yes.
And you
two things I would tell you.
Okay.
First of all, your players are your friends. They want to be entertained. They're not going to hate you. Don't be afraid. It's like going to an audition as an actor. The people on the other side of the table want to cast you. They want to be fans. Your players want to enjoy your game. They're not going to hate you. Second of all, be a fan of your players. Don't get caught up in the weeds by trying to don't get caught up in the weeds by trying to second guess them or get in your head. Be a fan of your players, and don't get mad if they make a decision that that's not your job. Your job is to just say yes and help them and be a fan and be excited about whatever they choose to do and whatever character they choose to play. In the past, when I was younger at 15, I would have a definite idea of the tone and what I want my game to be, and I would sort of punish my players for wandering off or making stupid characters. Don't do that.
Right. Now the players are your friends. That's something that hasn't been touched on yet, and I think that is critically important, especially for someone, because being a GM is like being a performer. It's like being on stage, because you are sitting at now it's a stage with a very small house. You only have 4 to 6 or 8 people who are your audience, and it's a collaborative thing. It's not just I'm standing on stage performing for people, but there is that sort of anxiety about it.
Totally.
That sort of that's extremely similar to stage fright.
Absolutely.
And it's, in fact, it might even be a little worse because it's a more intimate situation, especially if it's at a game convention when it's people that you don't know.
They say the number one fear that people have is public speaking, and being a GM is a chunk of that. It has the same anxiety attached to it.
And I think it's important to remember, because, I mean, there is a tendency for people to sort of catastrophize any situation they go into and sort of obsess on the worst possible outcome that could happen. Mm-hmm. And there's also a tendency for people to sort of attribute not the best motives to people. We tend to do that by default. More and more, I think, as time goes on, we're getting more and more like that. And I think that it is important to remember that the people who are sitting down at the table are there to have a good time.
Norm.
And those people are extremely rare. And the chances of getting a whole table full of those people is extremely remote. And it only takes one or two people who are like, no, I'm here to have fun, I'm here to have a good time, and contribute to the good time. And if you just have one or two of those people, all of a sudden that kind of dissipates the you must entertain me people. And it makes them less relevant. So, I mean, I think it is extremely important to remember that everyone is there to have fun.
Mm-hmm. And they're your friends.
Right.
This comes from actors auditioning. One of the biggest, hardest, most artificial things in the world is going in for an audition. Because you basically walk into a room and there's a bunch of people sitting at a table with their arms crossed judging you.
Right.
And then you have to bring your best at that point. And what people and actors fail to remember is that the people on the other side of that table really want to cast you. They don't want to be in this room any longer than they have to. It's an awkward situation for everybody. They're like, oh God, these people are, and they can smell the nerves. It starts to make them feel weird. It's weird for everybody, but there's no other way to do it. So the actor has to come in, and the thing the actor has to remember is that the people on the other side of the table don't want to hate you. They actually want to cast you and move on with their lives.
Yeah, they want to find the right person for every role and get the fuck out of there.
They really do want you to succeed. They're really like, oh God, I really wanted you to be good. So it's something to remember that the people on the other side of the table are not your enemies. They are your friends, and they really want to have a good time. And it can apply to role playing as well, the role playing games as well. The people on the other side of the table are not people that you need to attack, that you don't even need to impress. They just are there to have a good time. We're all there to tell a story and have fun. And it's not a competition. They're not there to judge you. They don't hate you, and they're not gonna. Sometimes you get the wrench thrower who's thinks it's fun to just sort of upset the tables on you and stuff, but that's not always the case. Sometimes it comes from a player motivation. Sometimes it just comes from somebody being bored. But these people are there, and they're your friends. Relax. There was another side note I was going to have with auditioning. It'll come to me in a bit, but that's it helps with the nerves. Oh, I remember what it is. In some of the acting books I've read, where nerves come from a lot of different reasons. When we get up on stage, you get nerves. You get a little bit of stage fright. Everybody gets, our heart rates elevate. Your eyes get wide. You can feel it, but it can get crippling. There are famous actors that have been on stage their most of their life, and all of a sudden they come down with stage fright, and they can't. It's crippling. And every actor, every performer has had that happen. Whether you're in a rock band, whether you're a folk musician, whether you're an actor, every performer has to deal with nerves. And one of the greatest things I read recently was about how you take the concept of nervousness and anxiety and you turn it into excitement. Mm-hmm. The same physiological responses happen from nervousness as happen to excitement. If you relabel those nerves as excited, suddenly you're not terrified anymore. You're excited to be on stage. Right. You're excited to perform. You're excited to GM. You're not nervous about it. It's just a simple relabel in your head. I'm not nervous. I'm excited.
Right.
And it's a paradigm shift, and it will change the way that you are now approaching it. Instead of being terrified, you're now excited to do what you're going to do.
It's like a racehorse. Like a racehorse. Are they nervous that they're about to go race, or are they excited to get out and run as fast as they can?
It's a simple trick, and it sounds stupid, but if you just think of it as being excited instead of being nervous, it will erase all of that fear.
Right. And I think the being a fan of your players, I think that is, and that's something we say a lot, but it is really, a core concept for GMing in a way that makes you not a prick.
It's really hard to do, especially when you have players that are being pricks or doing dickish things, or you're like, why are you ruining my tone?
My delicately created plot.
Setting up a great creepy plot, and you've ruined it, you douchebag. And it's really hard, but you have to remember to be a fan. This is their story. This is the one they want to tell. And right. At some point you could have a discussion like, is this the, I've been setting up a dark, somber tone, and you made a guy that throws pies. Do we want to change the tone of the game? Because that's not what I had set out, But that's a discussion to have later. You don't take it out on them in the middle of the game.
Right. And I think I mean, you have to remember, or should remember that the player characters are the protagonists of your story. And I mean, as a GM, you kind of need to think of it like you're reading a novel, not writing one, but reading one. It's like if you really, it's like a really good book. You always end up caring about the protagonist in the story, right? And when bad things happen to him, you feel bad for him. And when good things happen to him, you feel happy. And it is critically important to have that kind of a mindset. Now, that's not to say let the player characters do whatever they want, because you want to have an interesting and challenging story. So, I mean, if there's pitfalls and there's bad things that happen, you need to let those things happen, and you'll feel bad about it. You're like, oh man, I didn't. Or like when I kill a character in a game in a campaign that's been going for a long time, I always feel bad about that. Because it's not.
I think you should.
Yeah, I think unless it's someone who said, "Okay, I figured out my character's going to go out in a blaze of glory." You know what I mean? And that kind of situation where the whole thing is extremely well planned, but when it comes as a surprise, like your character got killed, and it's like, oh, I kind of feel bad about the character. I like that character.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think it's also, again, another mind trick you should play with yourself. Is it's not, as a GM, it's not your story. It's our story. You're just helping to facilitate it. And I think you need to remember that the story that you set out to tell is not your story anymore. I mean, Jib was always famous for saying, my plans hold up right up until the moment they make contact with the players.
Right.
And it's important to remember that it's not your story anymore. The minute that you release it into the wild and the players have interaction with it, it's our story now. And you need to let it go. You need to let it go and roll with whatever the players are doing. And that's when I say be a fan of your players. So, because instead of like hating your players for messing up your story, hating your players for messing up the tone, hating your players for not taking the plot clues that led to this awesome thing that you spent 3 weeks planning, be a fan of the choices that they're making anyway. And it's hard. It can be hard sometimes. You're like, damn it, I spent 3 weeks drawing out a wizard tower, developing the NPCs, and you guys went and left the town and went out into the woods, and I don't have anything planned. Damn it. But that's their choice, and it's you'll find if you relax and roll with what they have, everybody's going to have a much better time anyway.
Exactly.
And now, like I said, you can just now take your wizard tower and turn it into a underground mine, and they fund it in the woods. That planning can be reused. It can always be used. I'm always a big fan of repurposing stuff. But it's important to remember that it's not your story, it's ours. It's a collaborative story part. And so in the middle, if you find your blood pressure rising and you start to get mad, take a deep breath, be a fan of your players, and remember that you're all telling the story. It's not just yours. I know we say that a lot, and it's hard to remember.
It is.
I love how my green can is looking.
Is that LaCroix? What is that we do?
Yeah, it's key lime.
It's a key lime?
Mm-hmm.
Key lime. As opposed to regular lime.
I don't know what a key lime is.
They're
I guess
little.
It opens doors.
They're little tiny things. They're that big.
There's a key lime pie. I don't know.
Well, that's made out of key limes. But they're little. They're little tiny. Because my neighbor next door has a key lime tree right next to our fence, and so I get key limes. I don't use them, but they're little tiny guys.
Yeah.
And they're limes, but they're just little itty bitty guys.
Little limes. That's about all you need from a lime, really. It's not like you get these giant limes. Like, it's like I have a lemon tree.
Yeah, so do I.
Like one lemon a month at most.
Well, I try to use one a week.
But it's like I can't keep up with all these lemons. What do you do with a bunch of lemons?
All my neighbors have a standing invitation to come into my front yard with a bag and take lemons whenever they want.
It's a really old lemon tree. It's a Meyer lemon tree, and the fact the neighborhood has voted our lemon trees the tastiest lemons, and we don't do anything to it. We ignore it, but it's been there forever. So
right.
I think the lemons are actually almost like oranges. Nobody here. This is a Southern California thing. It's like, oh my God, I've got so much citrus, I don't know what to do with it. Oh, it's like first world problems.
Yeah, my ring doorbell goes off, and it's my neighbors coming into my yard with a bag, and doop, 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 doop. I said, just make sure you leave a couple ripe ones for me.
Yep.
And other than that, take
and
all you
be
want.
careful when you pull them off the trees so you don't break branches and things. That's it.
All they're going to do is sit on there until they get overripe, and they're going to fall on the ground.
And squirrels eat them.
Well, I think the coyotes jump into the yard and eat them.
Yeah.
Because coyotes, I know coyotes love rotted fruit. It's one
Raccoons
of their favorite.
and possibly.
Yeah.
There's a myth about L.A. People think L.A. is just a big, vast, concrete city, and it kind of is, but it's surrounded by a lot of sort of hills and valleys and what they call arroyos, and there's deer. I've seen deer from the freeway. We've got coyotes. We've got
bobcats.
Cougars, bobcats, bears. The other day, like in this next city over in Monrovia, there was a bear that the girl pushed off a fence because it was like getting
was
in
that
their yard.
Monrovia? I didn't realize that was local.
There's raccoons. They killed my first cat. I mean, we've got so much wildlife that wanders into LA. It's really kind of strange. Not from here. I moved here. I've been living here a long time, and I still get baffled at the fact that there's a lot of wildlife in the evenings that wander through the city.
Even when I lived in La Mirada, which is 30 minutes from any freeway, and it's right in the middle of a concrete jungle, and that whole place, you would think there's no wild animals here. But when I lived there, there was a family of raccoons that used to come and eat cat food because I kept the cat food in the front yard. The raccoons would come and they eat it really loud, and it was mom and dad and like 4 little babies, and then a year or two later, the 4 babies were showing up by themselves, and they were getting bigger and bigger.
We also have a skunk that wanders through it. Like once a month, he does his patrol, and you know when you have a skunk around.
Oh yeah,
everybody knows. So I mean, it's funny. Maybe that's something you put into your fantasy games. It's like, I think we have more wildlife wandering through our modern city than any medieval town I've ever built. Of course, in medieval towns, they'd be like, is that a coyote? Let's eat it.
Eating dog. All right. The email, con games, I'll read the front half. You can read the second half. From right. This is from Andreas. Buckhorn Games. It's kind of a response to the last guy. It said some fascinating stuff in here, though, that I thought was kind of crazy about how they organize games.
In Sweden. We have a huge contingency of people in Sweden.
Hi, Stu and the crew. First off, let me say how much I enjoyed Murmurs at the Abyss. AP Call of Cthulhu is such an AP-friendly game, even though it's pretty old school, as the mechanics and crunch-heavy combats are not taking up much of the game time, but the story and the characters do. Thanks, Stu. And thank you thanks to the very entertaining players.
I just want to stop you there and say that's a really good GMing note as well, which is to try to hide the mechanics as much as possible and maybe keep it about the stories and yeah, that's a good. I remember playing GURPS with the Mook, and he hid all those mechanics and just made the game fun that way. Right. Instead of worrying about, oh my God, what are the multitude of things to do, he would just move it along, and it's a really great thing that great GMs do.
Yeah, I think my next campaign is going to be GURPS. I've been refamiliarizing myself with the mechanics, and I'm like, yeah, it's amazing. Most of my knowledge is of 3rd edition, not 4th, but it didn't change much. Mostly it changed in character creation, not in just the regular stuff of the game.
And Stu, I bet if you just ran it like 3rd, nobody's going to know or care.
No, they wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. Well, the only time you'd notice is during combat they went from having 3 types of damage to like a dozen. Which I don't know if that was unnecessary.
But again, you could hide all that. You could just say, roll your dice, and you figure out if it's crushing.
Well, I found all the old tables I made of all the shit that I would need to know from 4th edition that's different. Mm-hmm. And I found one of those old GM screens I made out of 2 binders, and it has the pages inside, and it's got Hero in it, and it's got GURPS in it, and I had something else. It might have been Mongoose Traveler. I don't remember. So,
but again, nobody's going to sit around and take you to task if you're using the wrong slashing damage.
Not at the table.
As long as the combat's moving along, I think your players will be happy.
The internet will. A few reactions to the letter on 2812 about running old and obscure games at cons. I have not been to a face-to-face game convention in years, as real life with kids intervened, after I had spent 10 years of my youth regularly visiting a couple of cons. But back in those days, and in general here in Sweden, things are done a bit differently. And this is where the world turns upside down, because this is craziness. I'm just going to say.
Okay. Spoilers.
Well, not the beginning part, but as it goes on. More often than not, the game is advertised by the title, a short blurb of in-setting information on the situation, and then the game system might be mentioned. Back in the 90s, that game system was often freeform, quote unquote.
Or, as we would say here, homebrewed.
Right. Or fuck the rules. Or if the game system was mentioned, it was rarely used more than the character sheets was used as a guideline on what your character could and would do. I know
it's not so much a rule as a guide.
Right.
You know.
I know I thought a few times that signing up for a game to try out a setting and system was a good idea, but it never was, as the game system was almost always superfluous. If we relate that to the individual who wrote in show 2812, without trying to entice people to sign up for obscure games, the question becomes, what made us sign up to a game when the game system was never used? It was the title and the short blurb that did it. People quickly became good at describing a scene with good drama and excitement and a cliffhanger that enticed you to sign up and resolve that issue. It might be
the elevator pitch.
Yeah, it might be useful even if you do use the game system, and it in itself will not draw in players. You want to conclude it?
Sure. As an aside, a Swedish peculiarity.
This is where it gets crazy.
Seems to be the sign-up system. We did not have individual sign-ups. Yes, you read that right. You signed up as a group. Yes, that group of friends who came to your living room table, went to a convention, and you played with those same people in a different place, sleeping and eating badly for a weekend. I'm pretty sure that other systems make more sense. I'm all for the North American way, personally.
That is
you
crazy.
Want to pause there and discuss
that is crazy. Can you imagine? Now, I know people that do this. We used to do this when we used to, back in the 70s when I first started going to game conventions, and then the 90s when I started going back to them again. We would sign up for stuff together. 2 or 3 of us would all sign up for the same game, but it was never assumed that you were going to do that.
Right.
I mean, I used to always sign up for, like, diplomacy, but no one would ever come and... none of my friends like playing diplomacy enough to play it at a game convention, but that's the easiest place to play it, because you don't know the people you're going to be backstabbing.
Well, I did find, like, at our conventions, that a lot of the same Happy Jacks crew people, and even people I would play with, would sign up for my games.
Right.
Or sign up for our games. And so even though I maybe wasn't playing in a game with them currently, I had played with them before, and now they were in my game at the convention. And I sort of felt, I think I've been on record as talking about it, like, I kind of want other people who aren't associated with the
right.
to come in and try out a new system, and so we can meet new people. And, I also sometimes want to GM for new people, because it's a whole new experience, a new vibe. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and the other thing is, one of the reasons that we go to the game conventions is to also spread the word about Happy Jacks as well, and that helps when you have people who don't know about us signing up for games.
Right. And if you in Sweden, if you show up with your old game crew, you're all sitting down, and somebody else is really all you're doing is just having a guest GM for a while. You're not
right.
Nothing's changing. You're not being exposed to new ways of play. You're not really being exposed to a new system. You're just doing a one shot with a new GM. What are you getting out of it, really?
Well, you get to see how someone else GMs besides whoever it is that always GMs for your home group.
That is important. I have learned more about sitting in on other games than I ever did GMing on my own.
But I met so many people who ended up becoming members of our sort of gaming circle back in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s, that at game conventions, because they signed up for games alone.
I agree.
And then, I met a lot of gamers that way. It's like, you seem cool. Here's my number. We do a game on, every Saturday or whenever it was. If you want to come and sit in and see if it's for you. We just do that all the time. That was a kind of how now people will go and play in public at a game store to, like, sort of vet new players.
Yeah.
That's what we do. That's what game conventions and the people who are good players, they shine all the time. So
no, you can. The North America way we can be circumvented again because this has happened as we're touching upon, which is sometimes a group of 2 or 3 people will sign up for the same game.
Yeah.
And so they're ostensibly from the same gaming group, and all of a sudden they're in the same game together. And sometimes it's a father and son. Sometimes it's 3 friends that usually game together. Sometimes it's somebody who's just doesn't want to be exposed to a brand new person. They're anxiety or whatever, so they want company, which I get. But it's a completely different thing when 8 of you you always game together are now show up en masse, and it almost sounds like they're doing more than a 4-hour game too. It sounds like this is like an all-day thing, but I don't know about that.
It's hard to say. I don't know.
Yeah, our convention is also just everything's done on a timely manner. Every game runs 4 hours, and then you end and you move on and you either do another game or you're done for the day. So there's a schedule to keep as well, and I also think it is. I mean, our games also talk. There's an elevator blurb about what it's about, but I know that Jim also lists setting right next to it too. So if you're Stormbringer curious, you can go through and search by setting and find out all the Stormbringer games, or you can also just go through and find an elevator pitch that you like, and then look over and see what the system is. So there's a couple of different various ways to pick a game in the North American way.
Right. Exactly.
All right. Let me end with a small rant. Can we please stop referring to games like software releases? Why on earth do we call it D&D 3.5 and Mongoose Traveler 2.0? It sounds ridiculous, and compared to software where a small minor release number or patch level will be very crucial, in game systems, it often matters far less. Can we not just call it 3rd edition? The difference is more significant versus 2nd and 4th, surely. If you need to specify, why not say 3rd edition revised? I bloody hate the 3.5/1_T1AB 3.0 games in my RPGs. End of rant. Take a drink. I know I need one. Cheers, Andreas. Kurt in Sweden. Kurt, I agree with you. And I also start getting really confused about, it's like the Star Wars. It's like, I don't know, when you're talking about, is it the first Star Wars, or is it the prequel? Is it for fuck's sake, just call it D&D. It's D&D 2-ish. D&D 3-ish.
I blame WotC, because they came out with 3rd edition.
Yeah.
And then they came out with another 3rd edition.
Yeah. Well,
remember?
and then Pathfinder,
because there was
took all that stuff and
well, there was the old 3rd edition, and then there was the new 3rd edition, which people just started calling 3.5.
Right.
Because it wasn't 4th. It was still pretty much a very similar system, but they fixed some shit.
And the Mongoose Traveler, though, they didn't really fix that much. They just sort of streamlined it and added a couple of things. It's still the original. It's still very playable.
It is still a very similar system. They changed the way initiative works, a couple other things, but most of it. I mean, yes, you can between the two, but it is a different edition, and there are people that like Tappy prefers Mongoose, the 1st edition of Mongoose. I prefer the 2nd edition of Mongoose because it seemed a little more streamlined to me.
I prefer the first one myself.
Do you?
I really did.
What's it like to be wrong? No, but I just I just started calling them that because out of habit, because people started, and I think it started when people started calling the new 3rd edition 3.5.
I thought 3.5 was Pathfinder.
No,
because they needed a way to differentiate.
They came out with 2 complete sets of the core 3rd edition rule books. They came out with the 3.0 books, and then they went, oh, you know what? We kind of fucked some shit up. I don't even know really what changed much, but when I bought those books, the original 3.0 books, as I'll call them, the 3rd original, that's shorter. But I bought those just to kind of look through them years and years and years ago. And then within a year or two after I bought them, they came out with the revised edition.
You think they just sat around and went, we need more money. How can we go to get some money? I know. Let's revise these books, add some new artwork, a couple new rules, and charge them $40 again.
Personally, I don't think they play tested the 1st edition enough. If they'd play tested it more, they probably would have found all the breaky shit. That's my understanding. Yeah. I really don't know. I never played 3 or 3.5. I have no idea what the differences are between them. I'll bet it has something to do with feats. It
I
always
think we're
does.
also, he brings up a really good point about software. I think we're all really conditioned to knowing exactly what little thing is different. And, you know, it comes, like I said, there's Star Wars analogies. It's the same with the movies. We're like, is this Star Wars prequels? Is it, you know, when you say number one, we're all conditioned in this world now to know exactly what niche this fits in, you know, before we can move on with our lives. He's right. What the fuck? Just relax. You're playing Mongoose Traveler. It's going to be fine. I'll tell you the rule that I'm using. It's not going to ruin your game for you. Okay?
Well,
just roll with it.
I'm seeing people are referring to Dungeon World as 2.0 too. I guess the superfluous part is the 0.0, except for D&D. When they came out with an edition that wasn't really that much different than the first one, they just fixed some shit.
Yeah, I get it if it's again like video games. If they've completely changed the game engine, you know, it's a different game. And the difference between Advanced D&D and 4.0 or it's huge. It's just it's like it's not even the same game. And that's understandable. But for the most part, if you're just tweaking a little, I'm with you. Right. Just don't get hung up on the niche, for God's sakes. Just move on. It's the game. It's just going to be a game. I'm going to GM a game. You're going to have fun. If there's a rule that's going to happen, I'll tell you what it is. If there's something you want to do, ask me if that's like, but just don't get hung up. Oh, so it's 3.5. And that, sometimes it also leads to...
you do want to delineate between different editions of the game,
do.
Especially
I'm
if
not saying that.
Especially if other material that comes out for it matters.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like if you
I do.
If you change the way your monster stats work, and we're suddenly, 1.0 D&D like modules will no longer give you the information you need to run the game in third edition.
No, I get that.
It's important to know that because
and players building their characters too will need to know, what spells to use, whether they have what feats are available, and depending on which edition you're playing, some of those are not available in others. I get that, but we get so hung up on the label that we just forget to have fun.
Right.
I think that's kind of Kurt's takeaway. It's my takeaway too.
Andreas.
I'm sorry. Well, Andreas. Kurt.
It is, right.
There's so many Kurts.
There are. I think that's why he goes by Andreas. That would be my guess.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Andreas Kurt, for the email. Oh, you know what? He's calling himself Kurt because I think everyone is starting to call themselves Kurt.
Oh, okay.
I think that's what's going on.
I feel like we missed something. Did we miss anything?
No, we have world building.
Initiative roll?
We have world building to do now.
Oh, that's right. That's the thing.
Right. So what we're doing is, as people come in, every time a host comes in, I'm making them come up with something for a fantasy world. That at some
I love
point
ideas. This is my favorite part of GMing.
Isn't it?
It
is fun.
I love it. Love this part. I love coming up with ideas, and I love it. And then I get so carried away in the details. That's the part I have the most fun with. And then the game's a letdown. I just spent 3 weeks in heaven doing maps and coming up with hierarchies and wizard schools, and now I got to run it.
Rhyme.
That's not entirely true, but I enjoy the world building part of the most.
Okay, what is so? Let me just, and this is going to get briefer and briefer as we go on, as this document grows. But last time, Tappy came up with Mariposa Grove, which was a bunch of giant trees, sort of like sequoias, that create a sort of gestalt sentience, and they drop pine cones on people to either chase them away or hurt them, and they also drop nuts that turn into these sort of vine golems that go along and attack people who are invading the forest. And it's not so much that they don't want anyone in the forest, but if you go in the forest with an axe, you're gonna get the shit kicked out of you.
I was just reading something recently on my news about how trees sort of communicate. There's a whole web of roots and fungus and stuff underground, and it's like if another tree is sick or whatever, the trees around it respond very slowly, much like ant time, but there is a definite reaction between the trees around the sick tree over time, which scientists are just now beginning to figure out, and why, because there's a lot of stuff happening underground. All of those roots do interconnect at some point. So
the whole ecosystem underground.
It's a whole thing that they're beginning to realize that
All you
trees
have to do
communicate,
is
not in a way, in some sort of way, there is a response, which is what what communication is.
right. All you have to do is see a Jerusalem cricket or a potato bug to realize there's a whole alien life civilization beneath our feet.
Those potato bugs are terrifying. Oh,
They're awesome.
I found one once. They're not up in Oregon. And one of those things. I freaked.
Oh, yeah.
out. I lost my shit. I could not believe that they're huge and they hiss and they oh.
And they have those weird ass markings on the top of their head that make them look like they have a smiley face. It's disturbing as fuck.
I did not know what it was, and I thought it was going to kill me.
Oh yeah, they do bite. They're not
Oh,
poisonous.
great! It's
Yeah,
a good
they
thing
bite.
I ran the other direction. I was screaming like a schoolgirl.
I got bit by one. They kind of hurt.
my God.
Oh. Hold on one
Okay,
second.
anybody who doesn't know what we're talking about, you can look up Jerusalem cricket or look up. The potato bugs are different. The ones we had up in Oregon are the little.
Keep talking. Keep talking about that. I got to take a phone call real quick. Hold
Oh,
on.
okay,
It's
that's
important.
fine. So, yeah, the whole Jerusalem cricket thing. I'm actually going to go off of what he had with Tappy's Grove. He mentioned that earlier, and I was thinking about a really great addition to that, which is, and the whole tree thing sort of tied into it, which is perhaps there is a druid or a being that protects that grove. And my thought was, because I love comic books, to go with a Swamp Thing kind of thing, which is there was a druid that died there, and his bones live in that grove. And so when the trees really need a protector, they animate these bones and cover it in vines and such. So there's sort of this undead animated druid that will interact with players.
Oh, you're making an NPC?
Grove. I'm making an NPC attached to this grove.
Okay.
Which is there was a druid or a ranger or somebody that died within that grove, and whenever the trees need a physical protectorate, they animate the bones of this druid in vines and leaves and muck and moss, and it'll come up out of the ground and interact with people. And it is the collective consciousness of the trees as in a sort of a physical form. Now, it can't leave the grove. It can only sort of stay within the grove, and it can give advice. It can also sort of physically attack. But it is sort of a swamp thingy, druidic tree being.
Almost like a revenant, almost.
Yeah. And it would be a physical manifestation of the tree, of the Parliament
Right.
of Trees.
I'm writing this down.
And I would, power-wise, even although it was sort of be undead, I would give it high druid powers. It could anything if you really needed a template to use, anything that say a 20th level druid would have, you could assign to this character.
Do the locals who live around that forest have a nickname for this thing, or what do they call it when they?
Oh, that's a really great idea. You could go as simple as the Green Man.
Okay, I'm also coming up with an NPC.
Okay.
My NPC is the mayor of Bridgeton, which is the city I came up with 2 weeks ago, which is the city that's built on the miles wide bridge over this river. I think I mentioned 2 weeks ago that basically the bridge, the original bridge, had been there forever, and they started building on the sides of it because there was not enough room on the banks, and it was unsuitable, and people thought it would be safer to build on the bridge. So they started literally building the city on this bridge, and this bridge is now, it goes across the river maybe 100 yards or something like that. But the width of the bridge now is probably close to a mile, maybe more. So it's this big, huge area, and the city spills over onto the banks of both sides as well.
This bridge, just the specifics for me, is it built out of multiple different materials?
Oh, yeah.
Is it all haphazard thing?
It's
or
all haphazard.
Is it been engineered to do this, like Teotihuacan or something?
No, there was original stone bridge, and it had been there for so long, no one even remembered it. People say it probably started out as a marketplace. That's where the marketplace would be, was on this bridge, because there's probably two cities on either side. And then as the cities grew, they started adding to the bridge, making the bridge wider. Some of it's wood, some of it's stone.
And do parts of it collapse on occasion and need maintenance?
Not so much. Mostly because they're real careful about the bridge, because about a generation ago, they used to transport underneath the bridge on boats, but it's so wide, it gets, you go in for a little while, it's suddenly pitch black, and about a generation ago, people stopped emerging from the other side. So no one really wants to go underneath the bridge at all.
Right.
So if there's a hole, people aren't going to know. I mean, there are holes in the in the street where they have like a well where the bucket can go down and dip it into the water, but no one's seen anything. No one knows what's happening when those people disappear.
And when parts of the bridge just collapse, they just pave over and build a new building over it?
Yeah, exactly. So the NPC is Alston Borgenschlag, and he is the Lord Mayor of Bridgeton. Borgenschlag.
Okay.
And he is extremely friendly. He's a typical politician. He's corrupt, big fat guy with a big comb over. And he's also probably involved with the local crime syndicates. But he's a total typical glad-handing politician. He's like kisses the babies, and if they had photographers, he would do photo ops. Oh, you want to take a selfie with me? Take a selfie with me. He'd all that kind of shit.
If there was a movie character, what would he be most like? Like if you were watching a movie, would he similar to
Boss Hogg? Not a movie character, but the
Done.
television character.
I know exactly who this guy is now.
Exactly. So, and he is the mayor, Lord Mayor. He's an appointed. He's not elected. He's Lord Mayor of Bridgeton.
Got it.
All right. And we have the Green Man who lives in.
Yeah, we could call him the gardener. We can call him the caretaker.
You know what? I like the gardener because that's almost.
Yeah.
It's almost more ominous because it seems so innocuous.
Yeah. Let's call him the gardener. And as I'm thinking about it, the reason he's there is he originally planted the grove, and he died there, and so the trees have animate his skeleton and cover him with vines. His muscles are vines and sinew, and so he's
much like the sort of the golems that he's basically sort of like an uber golem kind of.
Right. And the way I see him too is he's sort of always attached to the ground. Whenever he takes a step, the vines have to detach and then they reattach.
And then they regrow into the
right. And so it's quickly, but it's like,
and it probably comes in not just spreading from the bottom of his foot, but probably from underground. The roots come up as well.
Right. He's got some mushrooms growing off of him. And sometimes he's not there, and he just has to grow up out of the ground. And sometimes he's there the whole time. I mean, again, as a GM, you can gauge that if you want. I mean, he could be there the whole time, but I kind of like the idea of having it's a big grove, and he tends the trees, and he's a protectorate, and it's a physical way for the trees to interact with people, on top of dropping nuts on them.
Excellent. Okay. All right.
Hope Tabby doesn't mind. I just like I like that setting, and I kind of like that.
I know, it's cool.
Because, I love rangers, and if it's something in the wilderness, I'll go with it.
Right. All right. So that's about it. Erica, there's a few people in the chat room. Hi. Hello, chat
Hi,
room.
We started early.
Yeah, we started at 9 because the schedule said 9, so we started at 9. And that's about it. I will go ahead and close this out. Where's my soundboard? I'm going to have to get a new iPad. My iPad's starting to get sketchy. I'm bummed.
Planned obsolescence there, Stu.
I know. It's terrible.
It's just like the human body.
And I even got this cool little thing for it because it's on this little stand here that I can move around. And
to be fair, you've had that 5 years? Oh, maybe 10?
This iPad? Oh, I have no idea. I think this is a second generation iPad Air. It's the little mini one. It's a small one.
I'm going to say that's
because the original iPad Airs were little, right?
Yeah.
And then they eventually made iPad Air the regular iPad size. But this is like the first or second generation iPad Air.
I'm going to say it's like 10 years old. Does that?
It might be
fair, right?
It might be. I'd have to figure it out. So it's probably about time.
I think you got your money's worth.
I'm sure I did. You never get your money's worth out of any Apple. It'd have to work for 20 years. Although if this thing is 10 years old, and it's possible it might. I don't know if the iPad's that old, but if this is a very early iPad, if it is that old and it's still working as well as it is, even if it is on the fritz once in a while, that's pretty good. And most laptops don't last that long.
Smash cut to Stu spending the rest of his day looking up how old his iPad is.
All right. Come on. Nope, wrong song. There we go. Professional. Thank you for joining us for season 28, episode 13.
Ish. Do we really need it? It could be 13. 13.5.
13.0 of Happy Jacks RPG Podcast. My name is Stu.
I'm Stork.
And we'll see you next week for season 28, episode 13.1. Right here, I think in 2 weeks, on Saturday.
2 weeks.
Maybe at 9 a.m. Pacific time. We'll see.
We all look at the schedule, too. Look at the schedule. It's on the site.
Right.
And while you're there, watch some APs.
There you go. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Hero Pathfinder, fatal savage lands. Evil constantly usurping. Though we could do with less burping. Happy Jacks Podcast will be douchebags all.
The preceding program has been a presentation of the Angry Folk Media Empire.